Hello everyone, welcome to last part of video lecture on the module RTOS, that is Real-Time Operating System for Embedded System Design. So in previous videos we have covered almost all the concepts and we were discussing about the topic task scheduling. We had gone through different types of non-preemptive scheduling algorithm, right? So there we have seen 4 types of non-preemptive scheduling algorithm. So we started with first come first serve or FIFO, first in first out non-preemptive scheduling algorithm. Then we saw last come first serve, that is LIFO, last in first out non-preemptive scheduling algorithm. And the third one was shortest job first scheduling algorithm. And the fourth one was priority based non-preemptive scheduling algorithm, right? So in this video let us continue with the next concept, that is preemptive scheduling algorithm. So wherein we will be seeing different types of preemptive scheduling algorithms that are followed by operating system for task scheduling. So preemptive scheduling. So we know what is preemption, right? So preemptive scheduling is employed in systems which implement preemptive multitasking model. Okay, so every task or process in the ready queue will get a chance to execute in case of preemptive scheduling. But when and how often each process gets a chance to execute is dependent on which type of preemptive scheduling algorithm is employed. Okay, so the scheduler can preempt the currently executing task or process and select another task or process from the ready queue for execution. So in previous video we had gone through non-preemptive scheduling. So wherein if any process or task is scheduled for execution, it will hold the CPU till its completion, right? So it is not preempted, hence the name was non-preemptive. Whereas in case of preemptive scheduling, the task or process will be preempted by the scheduler and any other task or process which is ready or which is waiting in the ready queue will be scheduled for execution. Okay, so the task which is preempted by the scheduler will go to ready queue, and this act without the process requesting for it is called as preemption. So the temporary suspension of execution of a task or a process by a scheduler without any request by the process or task is called as preemption, right? So the preemptive scheduling can be implemented in different approaches. The two important approaches are time-based preemption and priority-based preemption. Okay, so the various types of preemptive scheduling that are adopted in task or process scheduling are preemptive shortest job first or shortest remaining time scheduling, round robin scheduling, and priority based scheduling. So these are the 3 types of preemptive scheduling algorithms which we will be looking in detail. Okay, so first is what? Preemptive SJF, that is shortest job first scheduling or shortest remaining time SRT scheduling. So what it says? So it sorts the ready queue when a new process enters the ready queue and checks whether the execution time of the new process is shorter than the remaining of the total estimated time for currently executing process. If the execution time of the new process is less, then the currently executed process is preempted and new process is scheduled for execution. So we've already seen what is shortest job first, right? So whenever a new process or task enters the ready queue, the scheduler is going to sort the ready queue based on which of the process or task requires shortest time for completion of execution, right? So later the process which requires shortest time for completion will be scheduled for execution. That is what we have seen in case of SJF scheduling, that is SJF non-preemptive scheduling. So what is the difference in case of preemptive SJF scheduling? We shall see. Preemptive SJF scheduling always compares the execution time of the new process entering the ready queue with the remaining time of completion of currently executing process and schedules the process with shortest remaining time for execution. So that is why it is called as shortest remaining first scheduling. So what this preemptive shortest job first scheduling does is, it is always going to compare the execution time of the new process that has entered the ready queue with the currently executing process. What is the remaining time required for currently executing time to complete? If the newly entered process requires less time to complete its execution compared to currently executing process, in that case the currently executing process will be preempted and newly arrived process with shortest remaining time for completion will be scheduled for execution. So it is called as shortest remaining time scheduling. Okay. So let us better understand this scheduling algorithm by considering an example. So here we are going to consider the same processes as we considered in case of non-preemptive scheduling algorithm, that is process P1, P2 and P3 with estimated completion time of 10, 5 and 7 milliseconds. So in this case we will be having a new process P4 with an estimated completion time of 2 milliseconds, which is going to enter the ready queue after 2 milliseconds of execution of process P2. So we need to calculate waiting time, turnaround time and their average values by considering preemptive SJF algorithm. So now to calculate waiting time and turnaround time and their average values, we should first represent the sequence of execution of these four processes, that is P1, P2, P3 initially, and later P4 will be adding to these three processes, right? So what it says, so initially there will be only three processes, P1, P2 and P3. So P1 is having an estimated completion time of 10 milliseconds, P2 is having an estimated completion time of 5 milliseconds and P3 is having an estimated completion time of 7 milliseconds. So compared to P1, P2 and P3, P2 is having the least or shortest completion time, that is 5 milliseconds, right? So that will be scheduled first, but after 2 milliseconds of execution of P2, there is a new process which is entering the ready queue, that is P4 with a completion time of 2 milliseconds. At this point of time, the scheduler is going to compare the remaining time required for P2 to complete, that is 3 milliseconds, with the completion time of newly arrived process, that is P4, which is having 2 milliseconds. So, which is having the shortest time for completion, it is P4. So, P2 will be preempted. That is, it will be suspended from execution and P4 will be scheduled for execution. So P4 will be executing for next 2 milliseconds. Okay. So now after execution of P4, so again there are three processes, P2, P1 and P3. P2 requires 3 milliseconds, P1 requires 10 milliseconds and P3 requires 7 milliseconds. So P2 will be scheduled again for next 3 milliseconds. So it will be executing. Now P2 has completed its execution, P4 has already completed. So we are having two more processes, P1 with 10 milliseconds required for completion and P3 with 7 milliseconds required for completion. So compared to P1 and P3, P3 is having shortest time for completion of execution. So P3 will be scheduled and it will be executing for next 7 milliseconds. After P3 completes its execution, the remaining process, that is P1, will be scheduled for execution, which is going to execute for next 10 milliseconds. This will be the sequence of execution of processes P1, P2, P3 and P4. Now we need to calculate waiting time, turnaround time and their average value. So initially when P2 is scheduled for execution, we assume that there are no other processes in ready queue. So P2 will be directly scheduled for execution. So waiting time for P2 will be initially 0, but when P4 is scheduled for execution, P2 should wait for completion of execution of P4, that is 2 milliseconds. So waiting time of P2 will be 0 plus 2 is 2 milliseconds. Okay. Next, P4 once enters the ready queue, it is not going to wait for its turn to execute. Since it was having the shortest time for completion, it was scheduled. So the waiting time for P4 will be 0 milliseconds, and then P3 should wait for completion of execution of P2 and P4. So P2 is 5 milliseconds and P4 is 2 milliseconds. So total is 7 milliseconds. So the waiting time of P3 will be 7 milliseconds, and then P1 should wait for completion of execution of P3, P2 and then P4. Okay. So that is 7 plus 5 plus 2, which is 14 milliseconds. So the waiting time of P1 will be 14 milliseconds. So now what would be the average waiting time? It is sum of all these 4 waiting times of process P1, P2, P3 and P4 by total number of process, that is 4. So it will be 2 plus 0 plus 7 plus 14 by 4, which is 23 by 4 equal to 5.75 milliseconds. Okay. So next is what? We need to calculate turnaround time. So turnaround time is what? Sum of waiting time plus execution time. So waiting time of P2 is 2 milliseconds and execution time is 5 milliseconds. So it is 2 plus 5 is 7 milliseconds. And for P4, turnaround time for P4 will be waiting time of 0 millisecond plus execution time of 2 milliseconds. That is 0 plus 2 is 2 milliseconds. And for P3 it is waiting time is 7 milliseconds and execution time is 7 milliseconds. So it is 7 plus 7, 14 milliseconds. And for P1, waiting time is 14 milliseconds and execution time is 10 milliseconds. So the turnaround time for P1 will be 24 milliseconds. Okay, so these will be the turnaround time for process P2, P4, P3 and P1. Okay, so now average turnaround time will be sum of these 4 divided by 4. That is 7 plus 2 plus 14 plus 24 whole divided by 4, which is 47 by 4, which is equal to 11.75 milliseconds. Okay, if we compare this average waiting time for non-preemptive scheduling, it was 6 milliseconds, and here we can see it is 5.75 milliseconds. So the average waiting time compared to non-preemptive scheduling is reduced or decreased, which is a good sign, right? Similarly, if we compare average turnaround time for preemptive scheduling and average turnaround time for non-preemptive scheduling. So now here it is 11.75 milliseconds, whereas for non-preemptive it was 12 milliseconds. So again here also we can see decrease in average turnaround time. So we can conclude that compared to non-preemptive scheduling, preemptive scheduling algorithms are good, because they have less turnaround time and less waiting time. That is the sign of a good scheduling algorithm, right? So the next concept is round robin scheduling. So initially we saw that preemption can be carried out through 2 approaches. One is what? Priority based, and another is time based. So this is one of the time based preemption. Okay, so here what is time based approach means each process which is present or which is waiting in a ready queue will be scheduled for execution for a fixed duration of time. Okay, once it is completed, the other process, it will be preempted, and the other process in the ready queue will be scheduled for execution. So this process may be rescheduled again once all the processes in the ready queue will get a chance to execute for a fixed duration of time. Okay, so What are the points regarding round robin scheduling that we need to know is it emphasizes on equal chance to all. So all the processes or the tasks which are there in the ready queue will get equal opportunity to execute. Okay, so each process in the ready queue is executed for a predefined time slot. So a time slot is pre-decided for every process or a task in a ready queue to be executed. Okay. The execution starts with picking the first process in the ready queue. Then it is executed for predefined time, and when the predefined time elapses or if the process completes its execution before the predefined time slot, then the next process in the ready queue will be selected for execution. So this is repeated for all the processes which are there in the ready queue. So we can say that all the processes which are there in the ready queue will be assured to get a chance to execute. Okay, so once each process in the ready queue will be executed for a predefined time slot, then the scheduler is going to come back to the first process in the ready queue, and then it is going to schedule the first process again to execute, and then this repeats. Okay, unless all the processes in the ready queue complete their execution. So in case of diagram we can see there are 4 processes: process 1, process 2, process 3, process 4. So there are 4 processes in the ready queue. First process 1 will be scheduled for execution. So once it completes its allocated predefined time slot, it is going to shift to, or the execution is going to shift to process 2. So process 2 will be executing. Once it completes its allocated predefined time slot, or if it completes its execution before that predefined time slot, then the execution will be shifting to the next process, that is process 3. So then it will be scheduled for execution, and it is going to execute for predefined time slot or till it completes its execution. Then the execution will switch to the next process, that is process 4. Again here also it repeats. After all the 4 processes are completed, then the scheduler is going to again pick the first process for scheduling. So this cycle repeats. That is what we need to understand. Okay. So this round robin scheduling is similar to first come first serve scheduling, correct? So the first process which is present in the ready queue is scheduled first. So we can say that it is similar to first come first serve scheduling, but only difference is that the time slice. So in case of non-preemptive scheduling algorithm, first come first serve, what we had seen, so there was no time slice. If the first process is scheduled for execution, it will be scheduled for execution till it completes its execution. Whereas here, once the first process in the ready queue is scheduled for execution, it is allowed to execute only for a fixed time slice. Okay, that is the first thing. The ready queue can be considered as a circular queue in which scheduler picks up first process and moves to the next till the end of the queue and comes back to the beginning of the queue to pick the first process. So that is what we saw, right? So in this case, the ready queue can be considered as a closed circular queue, wherein the scheduler is going to pick the first process in the ready queue. It is allowed to execute. Then the next process is picked for execution, and so on until all the processes in the ready queue get a chance to execute. After that, again the scheduler will come back to the first process in the ready queue, right? The time slice is provided by time tick feature of the time management unit of OS kernel. So in the initial videos, we have come across OS kernel services. There we have seen timer tick, right? So the timing reference which is required for this process execution is provided by that timer tick OS kernel service. Okay. And this time slice is kernel dependent, and it varies in order of a few microseconds to milliseconds. Okay, so the time slice can be of few microseconds to few milliseconds, and this varies from kernel to kernel or operating system to operating system. So this time slice for round robin scheduling is not fixed. It varies from operating system to operating system. And then one more thing is that certain OS kernel allow the time slice as user configurable. That is, the users can configure or set the time slice. That is also allowed in certain types of operating system. Okay. So that was the points about round robin scheduling. So let us consider an example for better understanding. Yes. So here what we have seen, that there are three processes with IDs P1, P2 and P3 with estimated completion time of 6, 4 and 2 milliseconds respectively. So the completion time for P1 is 6 milliseconds, for P2 is 4 milliseconds and P3 is 2 milliseconds, which are going to enter the ready queue together in the order P1, next P2, next P3. So we need to calculate the waiting time, turnaround time and their average values by round robin scheduling algorithm with a time slice of 2 milliseconds. So each process will be allowed to execute for a fixed time slice of 2 milliseconds. So we need to consider these things and we need to calculate waiting time, turnaround time and their average values. Okay. So we know that before calculating we need to represent the sequence of execution of processes, right? So according to this, the first process which has entered the ready queue is process P1. So that will be scheduled for execution and it is going to execute for 2 milliseconds, right? Next process is P2. So P2 will be allowed for execution next. So it is going to execute for next 2 milliseconds. Okay. And then next process in the queue, that is P3, will be scheduled for execution for 2 milliseconds, right? So now, since all the processes in the queue have got the first chance to execute for 2 milliseconds, the scheduler is going to come back to process 1 and we see that process 1 requires 6 milliseconds. Out of that, only 2 milliseconds have been allocated. So P1 will be scheduled again. It is going to execute for next 2 milliseconds. After P1 again, P2 requires 4 milliseconds, out of which we have given only 2 milliseconds in the first phase. So again P2 will be scheduled for execution for next 2 milliseconds and then P3 required 2 milliseconds and we had already given that. So the P3 has completed its execution. So it will not be scheduled again for execution. Next, so P1, again scheduler will come back to first process, that is P1. So again it requires 2 more milliseconds for completion. So it will be scheduled for execution and P2 required 4 milliseconds which has been already allocated and it has also completed its execution. So now all the three processes have completed their execution, right? So this will be the sequence of execution of these three processes P1, P2 and P3, right? So now for this we need to calculate waiting time, turnaround time and their average values. Okay. So if you consider process 1, P1, so initially it is having no waiting time, but P1 should wait for these 2 milliseconds when P2 is executing and these 2 milliseconds when P3 is executing and again these 2 milliseconds when P2 is executing. So the waiting time of P1 will be 6 milliseconds, right? And then P2 should wait when P1 is executing here 2 milliseconds, again when P3 is executing for 2 milliseconds and P1 is executing for 2 milliseconds. So it is 2 plus 2 plus 2. Again P2 is having waiting time of 6 milliseconds and P3 should wait for completion of this time slice and this time slice, that is 2 millisecond plus 2 millisecond only. So it is 4 milliseconds. So the waiting time for process 1 is 6 millisecond and for process 2 P2 is 6 millisecond and process 3 P3 is 4 milliseconds, right? So next is average waiting time. It will be sum of these three values, that is 6 plus 4 by 3. So it is 16 by 3, which is equal to 5.33 milliseconds, right? So now what will be the turnaround time for these three processes? So it is sum of waiting time and execution time. So process 1 should wait for 6 milliseconds and it is going to execute for 6 milliseconds. So it will be 12 milliseconds. And then process 2 should wait for 6 milliseconds and it should execute for 4 milliseconds. So it is 6 plus 4 is 10 milliseconds. And P3 should wait for 4 milliseconds and execution time is only 2 milliseconds. So 4 plus 2 is 6 milliseconds. So these will be the turnaround time for processes P1, P2 and P3. Right? So now what will be the average turnaround time? It will be the sum of these three values by 3. That is 12 plus 10 plus 6 by 3, which is equal to 28 by 3, which gives 9.33 milliseconds. So that will be the average turnaround time for these three processes, right? So what we can see is RR scheduling, that is round robin scheduling, involves lot of overhead in maintaining the time slice information for every process which is currently being executed. So what is the disadvantage with respect to round robin or time based preemption scheduling algorithm is there is an overhead which requires to maintain the time slice information of each process that are currently executing, right? So the next type of preemptive scheduling is priority based scheduling, right? So out of two approaches, that is time based approach and priority based approach, we have seen an example of time based approach, that is round robin scheduling. Now we shall see priority based scheduling, right? So in this case, in priority based preemptive scheduling, any high priority process entering the ready queue is immediately scheduled for execution, whereas in case of non-preemptive scheduling, any high priority process entering the ready queue is scheduled only after the completion of currently executing task or when it voluntarily relinquishes the CPU. So that is what we have seen. So we have seen priority based scheduling in case of non-preemptive scheduling also, wherein if any new process enters the ready queue with highest priority, even then the currently executing process was not preempted because it was non-preemptive type. Whereas here, if any process is being executed and if there is a new process that enters the ready queue with highest priority compared to the currently executing process, then the currently executing process will be preempted and the new process with higher priority level will be scheduled for execution. That is what we need to understand, right? So we have seen that the priority of the process or task can be allocated or assigned in many ways, correct? So the same method is also followed in case of preemptive scheduling also. So priority allocation will not differ for preemptive and non-preemptive scheduling. Okay. So now we shall understand this priority based preemptive scheduling through an example. So here we consider three processes, P1, P2 and P3 with estimated completion time of 10, 5 and 7 milliseconds respectively, and they have a priority of 1, 3 and 2. So priority of P1 is 1, priority of P2 is 3 and priority of P3 is 2, and 0 will be the highest priority and 3 will be the lowest priority. Okay, they are going to enter the ready queue. We need to calculate the waiting time and turnaround time and their average values by considering priority based preemptive scheduling, and also we need to note that there is a new process P4 with estimated completion time of 6 milliseconds and a priority of 0 enters the ready queue after 5 milliseconds of execution of process 1. Okay, so this is the scenario. So initially there will be only three processes, P1, P2 and P3 with priority of 1, 3 and 2. So out of these three, P1 is having the highest priority, so that will be scheduled for execution, right? So once it has started execution, after 5 milliseconds of execution of P1, there will be a new process, right? So initially P1 will be scheduled for execution. After 5 milliseconds of execution of P1, there is a new process P4 which is having a priority of 0. So which is higher compared to the priority of P1? 1, right? So P1 is having the priority level of 1, whereas P4 is having the priority level of 0, which is higher, correct? So now P1 will be preempted from execution and P4 will be scheduled for execution. So P4 will be scheduled for execution for next 6 milliseconds. Once P4 completes, there are 3 more processes now, P1, P2 and P3. So out of that, again P1 is having highest priority. So P1 will be scheduled again for execution for next 5 milliseconds. Okay, so once P1 completes, there are 2 more processes, P2 and P3. Out of this, P2 is having priority level of 3 and P3 is having a priority level of 2. So P3 is having higher priority. So P3 will be scheduled for execution for next 7 milliseconds. Okay, then the remaining process, that is P2, will be scheduled for execution for next 5 milliseconds. So this will be the sequence of execution of these 4 processes, P1, P2, P3 and P4. Now for these processes we need to calculate waiting time, turnaround time and their average values. So what will be the waiting time of process 1? So initially it is not waiting, so it is 0 milliseconds, but here it should wait for completion of execution of process P4, that is 6 milliseconds. So the waiting time of P1 will be 6 milliseconds, whereas waiting time for P4 is 0. So it has entered after 5 milliseconds of execution of P1 and it is directly scheduled for execution. So waiting time for P4 is 0. And what will be the waiting time of P3? So it should wait for 5 milliseconds, then 6 milliseconds and again 5 milliseconds. So 5 plus 6 plus 5 is 16 milliseconds. Okay. What will be the waiting time of process P2? It should wait for 5 milliseconds, 6 milliseconds, then 5 milliseconds and again 7 milliseconds. Okay. So totally it is 23 milliseconds. So these will be the waiting time for process 1, process 4, process 3 and process 2. So what will be the average waiting time for these processes means sum of these 4 values, that is 6 plus 0 plus 16 plus 23 divided by total number of processes, that is 4. So it is 45 by 4, which is equal to 11.25 milliseconds, right? So next is turnaround time, that is sum of waiting time plus execution time. So for P1, waiting time is 6 milliseconds and execution time is 10 milliseconds. So it is 16 milliseconds. And for process P4, it is waiting time is 0 and execution time is 6 milliseconds. So turnaround time for process P4 is 6 milliseconds. And for process P3, it is waiting time is 16 milliseconds and then execution time is 7 milliseconds. So it is 16 plus 7, that is 23 milliseconds. And for P2, waiting time is 23 milliseconds and execution time is 5 milliseconds. So it is totally 28 milliseconds. Okay. So now the average turnaround time will be sum of these 4 values divided by 4. So that is 16 plus 6 plus 23 plus 28 by 4, which is equal to 73 by 4, which is equal to 18.25 milliseconds. So that is with respect to this example. So what are the points that we can analyze from preemptive priority based scheduling means it is adopted in systems which demand real-time behavior. So in case of real-time embedded system, we are going to make use of priority based preemptive scheduling. Okay, and major drawback is starvation. So what is starvation? The process with lowest priority may not get a chance to execute if more and more processes with highest priority level enter the ready queue. Correct? So in that case, the process with the lowest priority level may not get a chance to execute only. In that case, we say that the processes will suffer from starvation. And to overcome this, we are going to make use of the aging concept. So what is aging means? It is a technique where we are going to gradually increase the priority level of the processes. So we are going to gradually increase the priority levels of processes from lower level to higher level so that they will get a chance to execute. So this process of gradually increasing the priority level of the processes is called as aging. Okay, so the major drawback of priority based preemptive scheduling is starvation, and to overcome this we are going to make use of concept of aging. So these are the three types of preemptive scheduling algorithm that we need to know with respect to this module, right? So let us move on to the last topic with respect to this module, that is how to choose an RTOS. That is, what are the parameters that we need to consider while selecting an RTOS for a particular application. So first is functional requirements. There are around 8 functional requirements. So let us see the first 5 functional requirements. So first is processor support, memory requirement, real-time capability, then kernel and interrupt latency, then inter-process communication and synchronization. So these forms the first 5 functional requirements out of 8 functional requirements. So what is processor support means? The RTOS which we are going to choose for a particular application should be compatible with all kind of processor architectures, right? So it should not be processor dependent, the RTOS what we choose. That is the first thing we should take care of. The next is memory requirement. So here what we should notice, operating system requires both RAM memory and ROM memory. For ROM is required for storing the operating system files, and RAM is required for carrying out the operating system services. But if we consider the embedded systems or the memory of embedded system, it is constrained or it is limited, and we should choose RTOS such a way that it consumes minimum amount of RAM and ROM memory of embedded systems. Okay, that is the second requirement. Then we have real-time capabilities. So it is mandatory that operating system for all embedded systems are to be real-time, as all the embedded systems are real-time in behavior. So we need to select RTOS such a way that compatible with the real-time embedded applications for which we are choosing it, right? That is the third requirement. Then we have fourth, that is kernel and interrupt latency. So the kernel of OS may disable interrupts while executing certain services, and this may lead to interrupt latency. So for embedded system whose response requirements are high, this latency must be minimal. So what is interrupt latency means? It is the time duration between an interrupt is raised and it is served. This time duration should be as minimal as possible for real-time requirements of embedded system. Then we have the fifth requirement, that is inter-process communication and synchronization. So what it says, it is OS kernel dependent. So how the processes communicate depends upon operating system or the kernel of operating system. So there may be bunch of options that are provided by the operating systems itself, or they may be limited options that are provided by operating system. So there are certain operating systems which are capable of dealing with the issues that are raised during priority inversion or resource sharing. So such operating system should be given more importance while selecting an operating system for an embedded system or real-time embedded system. Okay. So next, let us continue with the next 3 functional requirements, that is modularization support, support for networking and communication, and then development language support. So what is this modularization support means? So if you consider a particular operating system, they are going to provide vast number of OS services. So for our application, we may not be required of all the services that are provided by a particular operating system. Okay, so in that case we may choose only the essential modules of the operating system that are required for execution of our application and recompile the operating system image for functioning. Okay, so example of operating system which is going to support modularization is Windows CE. So whether the operating system supports modularization or not, what would be the performance in case of modularization of a particular operating system should also be considered while selecting an operating system for a real-time embedded system, right? Okay, so what is supporting for networking and communication? The OS kernel may provide stack implementation and driver support for bunch of communication interfaces and networking. So what are the communication interfaces required for our application? What are the different I/O interfaces that are used by our application? Whether the operating system under consideration supports all these interfaces or all these communication mechanisms should be taken care of while selecting an real-time operating system. So that is what the seventh requirement says, support for networking and communication. Okay, so next is development language support. So suppose if you want to develop, or that is what we need to code for a particular embedded system, not all the operating system supports all the development languages. So as per our choice of development language, we need to see whether the operating system under consideration support this development language. For example, if we want to develop through Java, then the operating system should be having a customized Java virtual machine, that is JVM. Only in that case Java applications or the applications which are coded using Java language can be executed or can be run over this operating system. So that should be taken care of. Similarly, if we are coding or developing our code using .NET, then the operating system should be having .NET Compact Framework, that is .NET CF. Okay, only then the applications which are developed or coded using .NET can be run or executed over this operating system. Okay, so OS may include these as built-in components or it may be available from the third party. Okay, to make it compatible. So some of the operating systems will be having these like Java virtual machine or .NET Compact Framework as built-in components. If not, these are available from the third party, but this operating system under consideration should be compatible with these components that are available from the third party. So only then we can consider it for our application, right? So these are the 8 functional requirements that we need to consider while selecting an RTOS for an embedded system, right? So what are non-functional requirements? So there are around 5 non-functional requirements also. First is custom developed or off-the-shelf, and then one more major thing is cost. Then development and debugging tools ability. Then ease of use, and then after sales. So in case of commercial operating systems, what are the services that are provided by the vendor after the purchase of operating system? So these are the 5 non-functional requirements. So in details, if you want to look, so custom developed or off the shelf. So depending on OS requirement, it is possible to go for complete development of the operating system suiting the embedded system. So then in that case it is called as custom developed. Okay, or there will be libraries which are readily available. We are going to use these readily available libraries to develop an operating system which is compatible with the application which we want to run over it. That is also possible. So the decision on which to select is purely dependent on the development cost and the licensing fees of that operating system and the development time and the availability of skilled resources. So who are the developers? How skilled are they? How well skilled are they? All those things will be considered to decide whether the operating system which is required for executing our application, whether should be developed from scratch, that is custom developed, or can be developed by making use of readily available library files, that is off the shelf method. Okay. Next point is cost. So this includes the total cost for developing the operating system, or it may be buying the operating system and maintaining it in terms of commercial product. So what is the maintenance cost for that operating system? And if it is custom built, what is the cost needed? Or if it is off the shelf built, then what is the cost required? All these cost related issues should be considered while selecting an operating system. Okay, development and debugging tool ability. So availability of these tools. So different tools that are required for developing our application over an operating system or testing the application over an operating system. There may be certain operating systems on which our application may have greatest performance, but there may not be adequate tools for developing it or testing it. In that case, we need to be little bit careful by not only considering its performance but also the availability of development and debugging tools. Okay, the OS which supports or the OS which is compatible with more development and debugging tools should be considered for our application. Okay, then ease of use. How easy it is to use a commercial RTOS. So if you want to buy an operating system which is already developed, so we should see how much easy it is to use that RTOS. Okay. So next is after sales. So once we buy the RTOS, that is commercial RTOS, so how the vendor is going to provide the services. So how often he is going to perform maintenance check and how often he is going to release the updates, and then how he can fix the bugs, whether it will be through emails or on calls. So how the services will be provided, what are the maintenance that need to be carried out. All these things should be taken care while selecting an RTOS. So these are the 5 non-functional requirements that we need to consider while selecting or choosing an RTOS. So that completes all the topics which are related to this module, right? So this is the reference. So the textbook Introduction to Embedded Systems by author Shibu KV can be referred for further information. We have covered with all the topics related to this module. I hope this learning process was enjoyable to all of you. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. We shall meet in the next video with a new module. So till then, take care and goodbye.